Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. On a spring day in May of 2015, a woman named Carrie Helminger set out for work in Seattle, Washington. Like many people in the city, which is known for its cyclist-friendly infrastructure, Carrie preferred to commute to her job by bicycle. When she arrived at her office that morning, where she worked as a physical therapist, she locked up her bike as she always did and went inside, thinking nothing of it. The day progressed normally, and her mind was quickly occupied when the usual flow of patients began to come in for treatment. It wasn't until Carrie went to leave the office for the day that she noticed it. Her bicycle was missing. Upon realizing that her bike had been stolen, Carrie went through the usual range of emotions that will be familiar to anyone who has been the victim of this type of crime. No, the bike wasn't the most expensive in the world, especially considering its condition, but it wasn't exactly cheap either. A brand new one of this particular make and model would likely set her back around $700. Adding to the frustration of the situation was the fact that it was the end of a long workday, and Carrie now had no way to get home. When Carrie called the police about her stolen bicycle, they responded quickly, but were careful to moderate expectations. They explained that incidents like this were extremely common, and that while they would definitely be documenting the theft in a police report, there wasn't much that they could do. Carrie had known that this would probably be the case, and therefore wasn't surprised when officers told her that in all likelihood, she wouldn't be getting her bike back. However, little did she or the police officers know that someone else would soon be on the case, and he wouldn't be willing to give up that easily. This is the bizarre true story of Bike Repo Batman, Seattle's most wholesome vigilante. Before we get to the main part of the video, we just wanted to give you a heads up that today's story is going to be a little bit of a departure from the cases that we normally cover on our channel. While it's still technically a crime story, as you might have already guessed, it's a little more lighthearted than the content we usually cover. Honestly, we just thought the story was really interesting when we came across it, and we wanted to share it with all of you. And considering that the cases we covered in the 2 previous weeks were exceptionally dark, we felt that this one might offer some interesting and much-needed contrast. As always, if you find our videos interesting and informative, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel, and if you've watched a few of our videos already, you might not even realize that you're not subscribed. With that out of the way, let's get to the video. The morning after Carrie's bike was stolen, she was in the middle of another busy workday when she received a text message from a number that she didn't recognize. The message was brief, and said something along the lines of, "I found your bike." Understandably, Carrie was skeptical of the claim. After all, she had no idea who this person was or how they managed to get her number. Immediately, her head began to swim with different scenarios. Was this a joke or some kind of scam? Maybe the stranger who had contacted her was even the thief who had stolen her bike in the first place. Perhaps they were now going to try and sell the bike back to her, or were going to return it under the guise of being some sort of warped Good Samaritan that was hoping for a cash reward. However, the more Carrie thought about this, the more it didn't add up. Considering the fact that her bike had been stolen when she wasn't around, it was almost certainly an anonymous theft. In that case, how would the thief have known who she was, or how to contact her? As Carrie continued to go over things in her head, she received yet another text message from the mysterious stranger. This time, they offered a little more information, asking her whether her bike was stolen, and saying that they might have found it on Craigslist. With her intrigue now slightly outweighing her skepticism, Carrie decided to give the stranger a call on her lunch break. When Carrie contacted the stranger, he introduced himself as Dirk de Groot, an engineer in his 30s who worked in marine construction. Dirk also happened to be an avid cyclist, who liked to repair and sell bikes in his free time, and it was this passion that had led him to reach out to Carrie Helminger. Dirk explained that for the longest time he had been looking for a specific bike for his wife for an upcoming trip that they were going on. The bike was a Surly Crosscheck, a good all-around steel frame bicycle designed mainly for commuting. Dirk had been randomly scrolling through Craigslist sometime late the previous night or early that morning when finally he found what he had been searching for. Not only that, the seller was only asking for about $300, less than half of what it was worth. However, as Dirk delved further into the listing, his excitement turned to uneasiness when he started to notice a couple of red flags that made him think the bike might be a literal steal. For starters, the asking price was hard to ignore. Though the bike was a little beat up, Dirk knew that it could have been sold for much more. It seemed like the seller either wanted to get rid of the item quickly, or they didn't know what they had. Then there was the pictures and description of the bike. The description contained almost no useful information beyond the make and model, and the pictures provided were blurry and weirdly appeared to have been taken in the middle of the night. Finally, when Dirk asked the seller a few general questions about the bicycle, about its parts, its frame size, etc., he couldn't seem to answer a single one. Deciding to follow up on his hunch, Dirk did a quick Google search to see what would come up, typing in Surly, Crosscheck, Seattle, and Stolen. When he did, the top result pointed him to a site called bikeindex.org. For those unfamiliar, Bike Index is a US-based non-profit organization that describes itself as the most widely used and successful bicycle registration service in the world. The site was co-founded by two men named Seth Hare and Brian Hance in 2013, and allows cyclists to register their bikes for free, complete with pictures and important identifying information like serial numbers. In the event that a user's bike is stolen, they can report it through the website, alerting community members and participating bike shops across the world about the theft. This way, if someone who knows about Bike Index comes across the stolen bicycle, they can alert the owner. The database is also meant to be a helpful tool for law enforcement. When Dirk clicked on the search result for Bike Index, he was taken to a listing on the site for a Surly Crosscheck that looked almost exactly like the one that he had found on Craigslist. The bike had been reported stolen by Carrie Helminger, and this is where he had gotten the information to contact her. After Dirk explained all of this during their phone call, he asked if Carrie could provide him some more details about her bike so that he could try and cross-reference it with the information he had gotten about the Craigslist bike. Though Carrie was still definitely a bit weirded out by Dirk and his seeming enthusiasm about her stolen bike, everything he had said so far made sense. She figured that she had nothing to lose, and sent Dirk pictures of her police report, more information about the bike, and most important of all, the bike's serial number. To Carrie's surprise, when she sent over these details, Dirk abruptly said, "I think I'm going to go get the bike." He explained that he was going to contact the seller on Craigslist again posing as a buyer, arrange a meetup, and then at some point during the exchange, confront the suspected thief and recover the bicycle. Carrie didn't know how to react. Of course, she was happy about the prospect of getting her bike back, but at the same time, she thought Dirk might be nuts, and still couldn't understand why he wanted to do this. Dirk didn't really seem to know either, but replied that he was getting a bit of an adrenaline rush from the whole situation. Dirk reached out to the Craigslist seller soon after speaking with Carrie, and arranged a meetup for that afternoon. The seller wanted to meet in downtown Seattle, coincidentally, right near the city jail. With that, Dirk prepared to put his plan into action. However, when Dirk arrived at the agreed-upon spot, he was immediately met with an unwelcome surprise. The seller wasn't alone. He had two other guys with him. Standing 6 feet 4 inches tall, Dirk was by no means a small guy, but he hadn't counted on being outnumbered 3-1. It was at this point that he became keenly aware of the fact that he had no idea what he was doing. Still, Dirk prided himself on being the kind of person that could talk to anyone, and he hoped that keeping his cool would help things go smoothly. Under the guise of giving the bike a thorough examination, he first located the serial number to make sure that it matched the one that Carrie had given him. Sure enough, it did. With the bike now 100% confirmed to be stolen, Dirk pulled out his cell phone as subtly as possible and dialed 911. Unfortunately, the call didn't go through. He had no service. With a second wrench now thrown into the works of his plan, Dirk decided that his only way out was to bluff. Turning towards the three men, Dirk said, quote, "Well guys, I'm sorry to tell you this, but this is my girlfriend's bike, and it's stolen. And I just talked to the police, and the way I see it, you've got two options. You can wait here for the police to come and tell them your story and how you came upon the bike, or you can just get out of here and let me throw the bike in my truck." No sooner had the words left Dirk's mouth than one of the three men took off running. Despite this, the two other men stood their ground. Tensions were beginning to rise, and Dirk could see that the men were beginning to get a little worked up. From the moment he had pulled up to the meeting, he had pegged the group of men as drug addicts, and he knew that things could go unpredictably if he wasn't careful. No one did anything for a while, until finally Dirk decided to make the first move. As casually as he could, he announced that he wasn't going to wait around any longer, before calmly grabbing the bike, throwing it in his truck, and driving off. He made it about 50 feet before getting stuck at a red light in rush hour traffic, but to his relief, the men didn't try to follow him. Clean getaway or not, though, Dirk had done what he set out to do, and quickly called Carrie with the good news. He met up with her a few blocks away from where he had met the thieves, and reunited her with her bicycle. She was ecstatic, and offered to pay Dirk for his trouble, but he declined. The sense of appreciation and accomplishment he felt was payment enough. In fact, as Dirk would soon find out, it was pretty addictive. After returning Carrie's bike, Dirk reached out to the Seattle Police Department with all the information he had come across during his bike thief sting operation. In particular, he pointed out that the guy that he had met through Craigslist had dozens of other bikes for sale on his profile, which he suspected were also stolen. The police were slow to respond, though, and Dirk grew more and more frustrated as he saw similar listings continue to pop up, only to come down shortly after, likely because they had been successfully sold. Over the next couple of days, Dirk found himself obsessively scrolling through new bike listings, not only on Craigslist, but on similar sites like OfferUp, Letgo, and Nearby. As he did, he began to make notes about sketchy listings, looking out for red flags just as he had done with Carrie's bike. He also started utilizing Bike Index regularly to see if he could match details from the listings with bicycles that had been reported stolen on the site. It was at some point while immersed in this internet rabbit hole that Dirk decided he was going to continue trying to recover stolen bicycles. He had always been the kind of person that liked to help others, and aside from a couple of hiccups, his first attempt had been a success. Moreover, he figured, if he didn't do this, no one else would. In that moment, a vigilante was born. Before we get further into Dirk's exploits, a little word on bike theft more broadly. It's probably not surprising to hear that stealing a bike is one of the easiest crimes to commit. Even if you're not foolish enough to leave your bike unlocked, most bikes at some point are left in spaces that are unattended, where unfortunately, even locks won't stop a determined thief. According to Brian Hance, the previously mentioned co-founder of Bike Index, it doesn't help that the cables that many people use to secure their bicycles are completely worthless. In an interview we came across, he jokingly suggested that you might as well tie your bike up with dental floss. However, even U-locks, which are generally considered to be the more secure option, apparently hardly slow down thieves these days, who tend to come equipped with a variety of tools including bolt cutters, pry bars, modified car jacks, and angle grinders. Hance says that he's even heard of cases where a group of thieves will go into an apartment building and saw through entire bike racks, sometimes making off with more than 20 bikes at a time. The second layer to all of this, according to Hance, is that bicycles have risen significantly in price over the past few years. We're probably all familiar by now with price increases due to the craziness of the past couple years, but this was the case even back in 2015. At the time, even a middle-of-the-road commuter bike could set you back more than $1,000. From there, the sky's the limit. Compounding the problem is that stolen bikes have never been easier to sell, thanks in large part to online marketplaces like Craigslist, which significantly simplify the process of finding a buyer for stolen goods, while also allowing sellers to remain anonymous. Add to this fact that most people don't report their bikes stolen anyway because they know the slim likelihood of ever getting them back, and as a potential thief, you've got a pretty low-risk, high-reward crime on your hands. It's therefore no surprise that according to the stats that we came across in our research, bike thefts have continued to increase in frequency over recent years, even as property crimes more broadly have seen decreases in a lot of places. According to the FBI, in 2015, there were well over 200,000 bicycle thefts, though these are just the ones that were reported. The true number is likely much higher. All of this is to say that when Dirk de Groot decided that he was going to go after Seattle's bike thieves, he really had his work cut out for him. About a week after Dirk recovered Carrie Helminger's bike, he came across another that he was confident was stolen. This time, the bike was being sold on OfferUp, a red, surly Karate Monkey mountain bike that was being listed for dirt cheap. Once again, Dirk was able to find the bike's true owner through Bike Index. It was a teenager from out of state. The boy told Dirk that his bike had gone missing when he ran upstairs for a short 20-minute visit with his girlfriend at the University of Washington. When Dirk arranged to meet up with the seller later that night, the teenager decided to come along with him. They proceeded to head to a sketchy area just south of the downtown core, once again with a ton of confidence despite the fact that Dirk had little to no plan. When they arrived at the meetup area, Dirk was struck by just how many bikes were there. One article we came across described it as the land of stolen bicycles. The seller had obviously been doing this for a while. Just like the first time, Dirk started by looking at the bike's serial number, confirming that it was a match to the one that had been stolen from the teenager. Once they were sure, Dirk not so subtly turned to the boy and said, "Hey, why don't you call the girlfriends and tell them we're doing all right?" doing his best to hide his wedding ring at the same time. Luckily, the teenager understood what he was getting at and walked away to call 911. The end to this sting was far more dramatic. 7 cops showed up and placed the illicit bike seller and his accomplices under arrest. As a result, a whole bunch of additional bikes were recovered. When police spoke to Dirk, they said that they admired what he was doing, but that it was also probably going to get him shot. It was already too late, though. Dirk was hooked on recovering stolen bicycles. As Dirk started to get a few more bike busts under his belt, word of his good deeds spread. The news eventually spawned a nickname, Bike Repo Batman. Bike Batman for short. According to the sources we came across, the name was coined by a 2016 article in the Seattle Times, which discussed how Dirk was single-handedly fighting bike theft in the city. The nickname came from a combination of 2 different incidents. The first was when Dirk helped a college student named Sarah Bronson, whose purple Specialized Dolce had been stolen right out of the garage of her new apartment in Seattle's Wallingford neighborhood. The bike had been locked up, but it was only a cable lock, and the thief had managed to make short work of it. By this point, Dirk was really in his groove, and after contacting Sarah, was quickly able to recover her bike with no problem. She was so impressed that she started referring to him as Bike Repo Man, and gave him a 6-pack of beer when he returned her stolen bicycle. The second incident happened after Dirk had made a bust where he was able to call the police, and they made an arrest. While speaking with them, one of the officers said that Dirk was kind of like Robin Hood. They thought about it for a second and said, "Actually, you're more like Batman." Bike Batman was the name that stuck, and Dirk didn't mind it. After all, like any good superhero, he wanted to keep his identity secret so that he could continue fighting crime without any additional hassles. However, this isn't to say that Dirk never made any mistakes or ran into any trouble. On one occasion, he got reamed out by the police after he went to meet up with a suspected thief who was selling a Rodriguez-coupled tandem bicycle. The custom bicycle, which would normally have gone for several $1,000s, was listed suspiciously cheap, and when Dirk met the seller and she seemed jittery and appeared not to know anything about the bike, he called the police. It turned out that the woman wasn't a criminal at all. She had recently gotten the bike by purchasing a forgotten storage unit. Though the incident was definitely embarrassing for Dirk, it was also a good learning experience. From that point on, he only went after bikes that he could confirm ahead of time were stolen with the owners. In another incident, Dirk narrowly avoided a potential disaster. After successfully recovering a bike from a thief, he noticed that the same person had put up another listing under a different profile. The guy had a similar texting pattern and recommended meeting at the same parking garage as before. Thankfully, Dirk arrived early that day. When he did, he saw the same thief, only this time he was accompanied by 4 friends who were taking up hidden positions in the corners of the garage. It was clear that he had almost walked into an ambush. Not only that, but Dirk later found out that the thief in question was wanted for violent crimes. Still, the vast majority of Dirk's recovery efforts ended in success. There was the woman whose orange Salsavia had been taken just before she was supposed to take part in a race that she had been training for months. and the system administrator, who was so happy that he sent Dirk an envelope full of cash. Dirk appreciated the gesture, but what he really valued was the thank you card the man sent. According to Dirk, he hung it proudly in his office for a long time after. While the police often felt that Dirk was putting himself in harm's way unnecessarily, they didn't fault him for what he was doing. Eventually, a detective with the Seattle police who specialized in property crime gave Dirk his direct line, telling him to always arrange for backup ahead of time. Dirk tried to call police for backup whenever he could, but he never let a lack of backup stop him either. Perhaps the best Bike Repo Batman story that we came across, though, was the one where Dirk uncovered a full-on burglary. According to reports, it happened when he came across a carbon Cervelo P5, an extremely expensive triathlon bike that retails for upwards of $9,000. The seller was asking for less than a third. Though all the red flags were going off in Dirk's head, there was no record of the bike on Bike Index, and nothing had been reported to local police. By now, though, Dirk was experienced enough to know not to rush in head first. First, he reached out to the seller of the bike and managed to buy himself some more time, saying that he definitely wanted the bicycle, but that he just needed a bit of time to get the cash together. In the meantime, he called the rep for the company that manufactured the bike to find out where it had been sold. They were able to point him to a shop in Oregon. The shop called the bike's owner, who got in touch with Dirk. Like many others, the bike's owner was initially puzzled when he spoke to Dirk. He said that he had left for Hawaii 3 weeks ago, and that his bike should be inside his house. Dirk replied that unfortunately, it was not. It turned out that 2 men with family in the bicycle owner's neighborhood knew that he was away on vacation, and had taken that opportunity to break in and steal everything they could from his house. No one knew about the burglary until Dirk stumbled onto the bicycle online. He had essentially solved the case. While Dirk definitely found his time as the Bike Repo Batman both exciting and rewarding, unfortunately, he no longer moonlights as a bike thief vigilante. In fact, it's the reason we've been able to use his actual name throughout this story. Though he never gave his name out during the initial news reports about him back in 2016, he allowed himself to be unmasked in a recent episode of the podcast This American Life, which did a segment on him. These days, Dirk says he doesn't have time for much of anything other than raising his kids, something that's likely come as a massive relief to his wife. While we have no idea just how many bikes Dirk actually recovered during his tenure as the Bike Repo Batman, back in 2016, when he had been doing it for less than a year, he had already recovered around 24 stolen bicycles. According to the newspaper The Guardian, more than half of those cases resulted in arrests. Even though it appears that Dirk has hung up his crime-fighting cape for good, there's no doubt that what he did was both unique and made a real impact on people's lives. And for Dirk, that was always the goal, to make his city better, one recovered bike at a time. Now that you've heard the whole story, what do you think? Do you know of any other cases like this? Are there any details that you think we missed? Let us know in the comments section below. And as always, thank you for watching.